Good morning. Welcome to the May 22nd, 2026 Indigenous Focused Disaster and Emergency Management briefing with information and news you can use as we prepare for disasters and emergencies on reserve and off reserve. Today, just a quick note, if you're watching the recording at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we'll be doing a live stream training on our TikTok channel. So after this, if you want to switch over to our TikTok at Hazardscape, you can watch the training that we're going to go through for emergency management, and it will be our module 1, the first 4 lessons within that, and it's focused solely on a Indigenous Emergency Management coordinator that has gotten a new job, and they're onboarding into their role as an emergency management coordinator. So stay tuned for that today at 10 a.m. As always, you can get this briefing on our app at app.hazardscape.com. It's got the May 22nd update here. Of note, probably, some of the bigger things that are listed on here, the Northwest Territories government released a new wildfire response guideline yesterday as it tries to reckon with the worsening impacts of climate change. Indigenous communities are asked to endorse guidelines through a sign-on process, which I guess I don't know anything about this guideline and whether or not Indigenous communities were involved in the creation of it, but I don't understand why you have to sign it. Like, what does that mean when you sign on to it? What are you giving up for that? So I'm gonna dig into that a little bit today and see what's going on with that, because that's an interesting approach that they would make or want those to be endorsed. Again, I don't know if there was consultation, but I guess if you were involved in that process or you do have awareness of that process, reach out. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. So we're still keeping up to date with most of the ongoing issues around Kashkuan First Nation, Red Earth Cree Nation, Shoal Lake, Sturgeon Lake, Moose Cree First Nation, Mikisew Cree First Nation. They've filed a lawsuit against Canada and Alberta, alleging both governments authorized extensive industrial development in northeastern Alberta without adequately managing cumulative environmental and health effects. So something to watch out for there. Today, we're going to start with the flood hub. It is kind of still lingering up in northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, and we'll take a look at the weather in a little bit, but you can still see, although the water levels, the river forecasts are on a decline, they're still in that extreme territory, danger to a warning, and it looks like it'll be like that at least for a continued, maybe even a week. So just keep an eye out around the rivers, the creeks in those areas. You can see here they're still even today just a little bit over that extreme level. And then in Ontario, it looks like they've had more precipitation up there. So they're starting to increase in terms of their flood risk right now. And we'll take a look at and see what's contributed to that over the last little while. Some of these gauges are running into the danger as terms of measurement. So must have received some precipitation there over the last couple of days, and we'll take a look at that. As far as special weather statements in and around Canada, just this one in Atlantic Canada, there's a frost advisory, which is interesting because they hit extreme weather temperatures here the last couple days, but now overnight they're expecting frost, 0 to -5 in the coolest in the low-lying inland areas. So not any significant concern for weather across the country today so far as forecasted. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward. Let's get into the fire danger. So we have seen some increased fire risk across the country over the last few days. If we go back to where we were on Monday, taking a look after the long weekend, or just on holiday Monday, Victoria Day Monday, this is what Canada looked like at the time. And today it's shifted a little bit. We've dropped down in some extreme areas up in the north, but we've picked up in high to very high areas across BC, Northwest Territories, Alberta, and Saskatchewan now. Northern Saskatchewan is now in that, moderate to high fire danger with Ontario, southern Manitoba, and then that heat that they had in southern Ontario and Quebec and Atlantic Canada really moved them into a high fire danger level. So looking at the fire weather index, it basically mimics that. We're probably, when we take a look at the weather, we'll see how these areas through Saskatchewan, Manitoba that are currently in a blue, we'll take a look at how the weather and the heat might impact those areas and kind of try and forecast the drying or the moisture levels there. So if we look at also, maybe if we take a look, we could look at active wildfires. Again, there have been some new starts. We'll flip over this one because it gives us a bit of data. Yesterday afternoon in Manitoba, 150 hectares, right in just not far from Peguis, up in that area. So we're seeing a bit of fire in there. We could take a look at our Indigenous lands map and see who's in there. So that's kind of near Fairford and Waterhen First Nations. So if you're in that area, there's a couple of new starts, 150 and 3 hectares. That's 2 fires, 150 hectares and 3 hectares. Couple new starts up in northern Alberta. This one yesterday afternoon. And then another one kind of up here near Wood Buffalo Park. Excuse me. So small fire happening just out within the borders of Wood Buffalo National Park already. There's a full response. That one happened on the 20th at 6 a.m. it was reported. So our friends up in northern Alberta, and then here as well, we've got one kind of full response May 21st, 3:19, so just yesterday afternoon. Birch River Woodland Park, kind of not far from Fox Lake and Little Red River Cree Nation. So going back to let's go back to where was it here? Fire weather index. You can see where those fires have started up in northern Alberta. They're getting into, a fire weather index of between 23 to 29. So that's historically been getting to be a very dry area. So, still that is an area of concern for most fire seasons. This one hasn't grown too much, 3.4 hectares. And then over in Atlantic Canada, just some small ones that kind of started up here yesterday or this morning being reported, but they're all in control. So one here in the Yukon, that's from the April 9th, May 21st. So yeah, we are getting new startups happening, which is expected as we dry out for the fire season. If we go over and now take a look at where we are in terms of weather forecasting, just going to see if I can bring this up a little bit so I can see my forecast gauge at the bottom. One sec. There we go. So this is the temperatures right now in terms of the country. You can see, a lot of areas right now kind of in those, single digits to maybe 10, 11, 12 degrees. Edmonton 13, 14. Doesn't feel like that outside, but it's a little overcast right now where I am. BC 14, 5, 16 up in high level. So pretty average temperatures as we get into this afternoon, about 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can see that there is up north, it's going to get fairly warm, 23 degrees, which if we take a look at where that fire weather index is, you can see that warming trend up north is just going to continue based on the temperature. Any other big hot? It's kind of an I don't know what's causing that area, we'll have to look and see why is that little ridge there so warm. But it's interesting, right? Because that's exactly where it's drying out in the Northwest Territories. So it's always neat to watch those wind patterns. Even Atlantic Canada, not going to get overly warm today as they come out of their sort of heat wave over the last little while. As we get into the weekend, tomorrow afternoon, we'll still see that warming trend across the prairies. BC, northern BC is going to stay a little cool. Southern BC warms up. Continues to stay warm up near Fort Smith, Smith's Landing, 20 degrees. Interior here of Ontario, Quebec, but below 20 again across Atlantic Canada. And then as we move into Sunday afternoon, you can see here by 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, southern Saskatchewan starts to increase in temperature, and how that's going to affect, it's going to, you're going to see that fire weather index increase from where it is today. So bit of warming temperatures coming. Forecast here goes out to Wednesday. If you take a look at that, you can see what Manitoba and Saskatchewan are forecasted for. 28, 29, 26. So that's going to be kind of, I would say right now, the high risk area in the country heading into this week, as you're going to see, those areas really start to, the fire weather index is really going to start to increase. As that warm weather coming out of the States is just kind of pushing up. Let's see here. In terms of weather, right now, nothing really moving in. Furthest we can go out is in the next hour. But yeah, those very interesting, those temperatures coming up into forecasted for next week. It's going to get really, really warm. It's going to taper off a little bit in northern Alberta, but we'll see how that shapes up. So Saskatchewan, Manitoba, May 27th, stay vigilant, even into the 26th, 25th, 24th. Yeah, by Sunday, you're going to start to see Sunday right through Wednesday, shifting right across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, which is going to increase the fire weather index for the next week. So we're going to see this part of Canada really ramp up in terms of fire weather index. So that'll be kind of the high risk areas with northern Alberta as usual. If we if we go back to where we were last year at this time, so you can see this is where we were a year ago. If we go out to the 27th, this is the fire weather index on the 27th last year. And you can see how Saskatchewan and Manitoba are fully engulfed. I would say with this sort of weather trend that's happening, you're going to see a very similar kind of layout in terms of fire weather index patterning. So by Wednesday afternoon, it's 29 in Saskatoon, 26 in the Paw, 24 up in Buck Lake. Winnipeg is even 28 degrees. It's going to kind of be very, very similar. So we'll go back to today, to reality, to the present. So yeah, lots to focus on getting into this next week. And then again, as far as special weather statements, nothing as of right now, just that frost warning over in the Atlantic Canada, Southern Ontario, which, you know, right now you can see they've come out of that. Obviously, it's 10 degrees now, but overnight it was quite cool. So yeah, this week's outlook heading into the weekend, not too shabby. Gonna have some decent weather. Stay focused on the flooding, you know, the high water levels if you're in the sort of northern to central border of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and then Ontario. I was going to look and see in terms of, let's see what we can see here for. I was going to see if we could go back a little bit in times, but I don't think we can go back. They must have got quite a bit of rain out there. Yeah, no, can't go back any further. But yeah, let's see what else was in our update. If you want this update, it is on our website. I want to also make sure that I recognize our sponsors. Kyle at All About Abatement, they do hazardous material assessments and services. So they handle lead, asbestos, and toxic metals, organic liquids, chemical waste. They are First Nations owned, and they are sponsoring our live updates and situational awareness briefings for Indigenous communities. So I want to thank Kyle at All About Abatement for their support. He's First Nations and understands the hazardous materials on reserve and off reserve. And they do great work with abating mold, lead, toxic materials, and they also do housing assessments. And it's always a good idea to get a housing assessment, hazardous materials assessment, especially for on reserve housing, because if they've never been done before and those homes have been exposed to wildfire smoke, they have mold, if they have asbestos in the attic, there's a lot that can be funded to remove that, especially if it's contaminated from wildfire smoke. So All About Abatement, they help us with our on reserve and off reserve Métis Nation Inuit community restoration planning for emergency management. They have environmental hygienists and testers that we have access to that help us make sure that if a community is evacuated, they get the treatment that they deserve. in their homes to deal with the re-entry and the recovery of those structures. And then I also want to thank Darcy at Premier Fire and Flood. They are a Canadian-owned disaster restoration services company. They do a lot of work across the treaty lands. They can work from water damage, fire damage, even vandalism restoration. So if you are in need of repairs to your school, your homes, your band nation facilities, health departments, Premier Flood and Fire are there. And they also have a great rapid response trailer. It's a 50-foot trailer full of restoration equipment that if you contact them and set up an agreement and you need that deployment of their trailer, they can get deployed on reserve in just a day or two. And that can save a lot of time in terms of water damage, mold growth. If your home is flooded and you need dehumidifiers and fans and assessments, they can roll out really, really quickly and get to most First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities that have roads in the summer or winter. And they can also stage their trailer across Edmonton, Calgary, Whitecourt, Saskatoon, all over the country. So thank you to Premier Fire and Flood Restoration for sponsoring our Indigenous daily briefings. They are Canadian owned, and thank you to First Nations owned All About Abatement and the work that they're doing in asbestos, mold, and lead abatement and remediation across First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities across Canada, especially following evacuations and events like that. So yeah, it's we're going to see that increased fire risk. If you're just joining us and you have any questions, please let me know. You can get this briefing, as always, at app.hazardscape.com. And today at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we're going to do a TikTok live briefing or TikTok live training on emergency management. So if you're interested in that, we'll be doing a walkthrough of our module 1 and the 4 lessons in that module. But yeah, the temperature here are rising significantly across the week, especially in central Alberta. So stay tuned for that. I'll take a quick run through here. Spring flood conditions dominated Ontario's far north through May. Fire activity in the northwest is now starting to build, with 3 fires detected. And they feed around Kenora and Dryden this week. So we do have those ones marked. New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Labrador, nothing to report. New Brunswick saw that cluster of fires. Fire officials in Northwest Territories are warning people to prepare for another challenging wildfire season, due in part to ongoing drought conditions. There wasn't enough rain last fall to completely replenish the moisture in the ground. 2 early season fires are active, and you can see those in our listing. BC, Saskatchewan, the flooding emergency is abating, but road access to Northern First Nation communities, including English River First Nations community of Patunuck, remains compromised as of early May. Highway 19 in Northern Saskatchewan, the only road in and out of English River First Nation with a population of 500, remain closed. Spring breakup flood risk along James Bay rivers is now considered past for the season. Moose Cree and Kashkuin have both moved past the acute flooding risk phase. So that was showing on our flood hub. Those are the drinking water situations. Paw and Gassi First Nation of Manitoba has a new long-term advisory affecting 130 homes and 4 community buildings issued in March 2026. So that's for water treatment. All the funding, no new funding announcements. Saskatchewan 2026-2027 Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Community Response Fund is currently open. No active wildfire or flood emergency in Nunavut today. Northwest Territories, 2 active fires remain in Yukon. So you can get all this information at app.hazardscape.com. You can see some of the community safety news that we have here. Thunder Bay, search for missing person in Thunder Bay is concluded. And Yukon harm reduction. Yukon Coroner Service shows no reported drug overdose deaths in the first 3 months of 2026, which is great news. We've got some preparedness tips, and then all of our sources for this briefing are on here. So if you want to go to app.hazardscape.com and get this full briefing, you can access it now, and you can download it through Word. And this is the training that we're going to be going through at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time today on TikTok. It's the Emergency Management Coordinator role. We have 4 lessons in the first module that we're going to do a walkthrough of. So stay tuned for that. And we'll stay focused on watching the wildfire or the fire weather index as we get going on for today's briefing, because as we know, Saskatchewan, Manitoba are going to see an increased fire danger and fire weather index coming into this week as our temperatures start to rise over the weekend by Wednesday. You can see here where it's going to warm up. So that's going to move the fire weather index in those provinces from the current sort of 0 to 16, 22, up into probably the 23 to 30 range. So as we watch the weather, this is by Sunday afternoon, you can start to see in Saskatchewan in the south, it gets quite warm. And then by Wednesday, we're going to see those warm temperatures in the central prairies. And that's just going to mean increased fire weather. So, all right, well, that's it for today's briefing. Thank you. If you're watching this recording or watching this live, it is always recorded on our Facebook and YouTube, so you can go back and see the full daily briefing for Métis, First Nation, and Inuit communities. Stay vigilant in the prairies as the fire weather index does start to escalate this weekend and into next week. If you are a First Nation, Métis Nation in those 2 provinces, just keep track of the weather, keep track of the fire weather index in your area. Watch and do some public education around, people going out into the bush with their vehicles, trucks, trailers. They can all ignite fires through sparks and having hot exhaust running through the grass. So keep an eye on that. Do some public education. If you have an emergency management program committee, make sure you're meeting with them to go over your plans. Make sure you're meeting with them to discuss evacuation routes and evacuation procedures and what you can do to be a little bit more ready as we walk into a fire season and a summer that's going to be quite warm. If you look here at the map, you can see El Nino right across the equator here, and that is what is going to start drifting north and bring that really hot weather over the course of at least the next 16 months. So stay tuned for that. And one last time, thank you to our sponsors, All About Abatement. They do asbestos, mold, and lead abatement for homes and structures. Kyle is First Nations, and he understands the importance of disaster and emergency management on and off reserve and in all Indigenous communities. He wants to make sure that Indigenous peoples across the country, like him, are getting timely information to help reduce the risk in their communities. So they do a lot of hazardous materials assessments, and same with Darcy at Premier Fire and Flood Restoration. They're a Canadian-owned restoration company. So give them a call. Don't go to the US-based restoration companies. Using US-based restoration companies just means a lot of bureaucracy, call centers, and no local knowledge. Darcy at Premier does a lot of work across the treaties, schools, band offices, homes. They also want to make sure that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities are getting the water damage, fire damage, mold damage support that they need, especially following evacuations due to flooding, fire, things like that. So thanks to All About Abatement and Premier for sponsoring these live briefings for Indigenous communities as we keep track of the fire weather index across Canada, and we map out the First Nation communities that join us on these lives across their lands, the Inuit communities in the purple, the Dene Saulteaux up in Northwest Territories, Yukon, and then we have the red treaty lands for First Nations across the country. So thank you to everyone who's come on to our lives and listened in and participated. If you're watching the recording of this on our Facebook or YouTube, which they're always posted there, leave us a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from, because we can map your reserve or your community or your lands to see where people are tuning in. All right, we'll see you at our next briefing on Monday, May the 25th. Take care, everyone. Know your hazardscape and stay prepared.